He was the hero of the Battle of New Orleans. Born in the Carolinas, he served as a courier to the local militia during the American Revolution and was captured and imprisoned by the British. He later began practicing law and moved to Tennessee. He briefly served in both the U.S. House and Senate and as a justice on the state Supreme Court. He became commander of the Tennessee militia, and in addition to New Orleans, he fought against the Creek Indians in Alabama, and he led U.S. forces in the First Seminole War, which led to the annexation of Florida. As a military hero, he ran but lost the presidency to John Quincy Adams, but won in a rematch 4 years later. During his 2 terms as president, he vetoed the Whigs' efforts to reestablish a national bank. He signed the Indian Removal Act, forcing Native Americans to relocate to Indian Territory. He recognized the Republic of Texas, and he fiercely defended the Union, threatening military action when South Carolina threatened to secede over the protective tariff. He retired to Tennessee and stayed active in political developments, supporting the Democratic Party that he created. He is our nation's 7th chief executive, Andrew Jackson. Let's take a look at a map at some sites associated with Andrew Jackson. I'll just briefly mention that there are some sites associated with the military campaigns that Jackson engaged in that you can visit. Certainly in New Orleans, there's a National Park Service site there. There's also one at Horseshoe Bend in Alabama where Jackson fought in the war against the Creek Indians. Now, there's some uncertainty about the exact location of Jackson's birth. Certainly, he was born in the Waxhaws region of the Carolinas, in this area here. The location where his mother was at his birth is uncertain. His father died just a little bit before he was born, and his mother went to stay with some relatives. It's not clear which side of the border she was on when he was born. He did claim to be from South Carolina, but both North and South Carolina claim him as their native son. What is clear is that he moved on to Tennessee. His estate near Nashville is Andrew Jackson's Hermitage, and that's a large plantation. You can visit the house today and a museum on that site. That is also where Andrew Jackson is buried. He retired to the Hermitage after his presidency, and he died there in 1845. Now let's take a look at some photographs of these sites. Now let's take a look at some books in my collection pertaining to Andrew Jackson. The first is a good biography that covers Jackson's entire life, but particularly focuses on his years in the White House. It's by John Meacham. It's called American Lion, Andrew Jackson in the White House, and it was published in 2008. I have a few older books here. This book by Marvin Myers was published in 1960. It's called The Jacksonian Persuasion, Politics, and Belief, and it's a series of essays on politics in the 1830s. Now, this one is kind of unusual. This is a work of historical fiction, although it's based on actual events. It's called The President's Lady by Irving Stone. It was published in 1951. And it's a historical novel about Andrew Jackson and Rachel Donaldson, who Jackson married. Rachel was married before and was divorced, and it was discovered later that her divorce had not been finalized at the time that the Jacksons were married. So their political opponents, of course, made much of this during the 1828 campaign. It really got to Rachel, and Rachel ended up dying between the election of 1828 and the inauguration in March of 1829. Lastly, I have a book on John C. Calhoun. This book was edited by John L. Thomas. It's a series of essays by different writers on John Calhoun. John Calhoun was Jackson's first vice president, disagreed with Jackson at the time that South Carolina threatened to secede from the Union over the tariff and over the nullification controversy, the idea that states can nullify federal laws. He ended up being elected to the Senate. He resigned the vice presidency and served for the rest of his life as a senator from the state of South Carolina. This book was published in 1968. Our next program will take a look at our nation's 8th president, Martin Van Buren.